So thank you, Mike. He was not the scheduled person to do the meditation, but he just hopped up and filled the need. So today we're going on a trip, and you know we're on the paths of the mystics. We're on path 6 today, so we're almost there. There's just one to go. Today we're on the path of the wise mystic. And so let me ask you a question. Who knows that a tomato is a fruit? Well, that's knowledge. So who here would put a tomato in the fruit salad? That's wisdom. So in Joan Borisenko's book, which is the one we've been loosely following, she tells this story of a legend that took place in India quite a few thousand years ago, and there lived a prince named Gautam Siddhartha. His parents went to great lengths to shield him from suffering, and he lived in this big castle, lived an opulent lifestyle. He had everything he wanted. He had married his beautiful young cousin, and they had a son. And yet, he felt restless. Somehow, he just felt a bit empty, and he yearned to go outside of the palace to see what was in the world outside. And so one morning, he called on his charioteer, and he says, "I want you to take me into the city." And so he saw 4 sights that changed his life. The first sight was a very old man. And the prince had never seen an old man before, and he looked at him and he thought, is that how my body is going to eventually wither away too? And then the second sight he saw was a sick man. And he thought, well, the human body is unreliable. And then the third sight was a corpse on its way to be burnt at the crematorium. And when the charioteer told him that we all eventually die, the prince was aghast. So imagine how you might feel seeing all those things for the first time. And they say that a young child who sees an old person for the first time is like really fascinated by that. Some of you might have seen a dead body. If you've seen a dead body for the first time, that might be a bit shocking. And so this is what the prince experiences. I'm reminded of the film, The Truman Show. I don't know if you've seen it or not. It's a wonderful film. And Truman is born, or at least grows up on the set of a TV show. And he thinks that's the whole world. But as he gets older, he starts to think, well, maybe this isn't all there is to it. Maybe beyond the TV set, there's something more. And it's a really fascinating film. He goes on all these journeys and discovers things. And this is what the prince has pretty well done. He's discovered there's a world out there beyond the palace. And he finds that life is not only full of changes, but it's undependable and it's impermanent. The famous poet Ovidius said, all things change. The spirit wanders, coming now here, now there, and occupies whatever body it pleases. From water it becomes cloud, from cloud it returns back to water, and nothing keeps its form. Everything flows and nothing remains still. And so the prince enters into what we call the darkness. It's a place where we can go if we have a big loss or if we have to face a serious illness. And so the day we're diagnosed with a serious illness, we might enter this period of darkness, and it is a possible time for transformation. But there will need to be a death of the ego, not a physical death, but when we experience something like that, isn't it true that we feel different to how we felt before? Our previous identity may not be relevant anymore, and we can move into a time of unknowing. St. John of the Cross called it the dark night of the soul. There's been, the dark night of the soul might be a time when you say, well, who am I, or what am I doing here, or, what's the meaning and purpose of life? There's been many songs written about the dark night of the soul, and I particularly like the one of Van Morrison. He goes, oh, it's the dark night of the soul. Like it's really quite torturous. But the words say, meditate on this, it will be revealed. Meditate on this and you'll get healed. Meditate on this and you'll feel whole. And I just love those words, and there's a lot of truth in that. So in the scriptures, the darkness is described as wandering in the wilderness. So we see the story of the Israelites who exodus out of Egypt, and they're off to find the promised land, and it says that they wandered for 40 years. And Jesus spent time wandering in the wilderness for 40 days. And what is the number? We know 40 is an auspicious number. What does it mean? As long as it takes. So this is the darkness. I mean, that's kind of what we do. We go through a process and we have to work with it. It's as long as it takes to get through that process. And so it is a spiritual opportunity for us. It's really an invitation for a new life or a new reality or new way of looking at something. So the young prince has 3 sights, and then he has a 4th sight, and he sees a holy man. And he looks at him and goes, well, he looks really poor. He's just got a begging bowl and a walking stick. And then he looks at his face, and he sees this great inner beauty and a sense of inner peace. And he says, that's what I want. So the legend says that he flees from the palace and he goes off as an aspiring holy man. So he does all of the practices, he follows the teachings, he lives the simple, austere lifestyle. He does fasting, and it's said that he almost dies from fasting too much. And then eventually he goes to the town of Badiah, and there is the Bodhi tree. He circles around it 7 times, great spiritual number of completion. And then he sits down to meditate, and he vows that he's not going to get up until he's enlightened. So he's there for quite a long time, and eventually the full moon comes and he gets enlightened. And he realizes at that point the 4 noble truths. So the first one of those truths is that life inevitably involves suffering. Well, isn't that true? Sometimes we have big suffering. Sometimes we just have little ones. In fact, if you think about your past week, you've probably got a few. They might not be big, but they might be little ones where you felt a bit irritated or annoyed by something, or even maybe a bit cross about it. The second noble truth is that attachment creates suffering. So codependency can come with a lot of suffering, isn't that true? And an extreme example of attachment has to be hoarding. I used to love that TV show about the hoarders. That's really attachment in a big way. So the third truth is the end of suffering can only be reached through non-attachment. So in unity, what do we say? Let go. There it is. The fourth of the noble truths is that the way to non-attachment is by practicing Dharma. And so Dharma is self-control. And we did touch on that a little bit last week when we spoke about the disciplined mystic, how the disciplined mystic works with a code of ethics and, all the various reasons why we would do that. But in Dharma, it's about the restraint of one's senses. So, being able to control how you react to things. And I had a personal experience of this week when I went to lie down on the floor to do my meditation, and it was, I was just kind of getting into the mood of it. And at the apartments where I lived, the caretaker decided that he'd mow the lawns. So he was on the big ride-on mower, and it's really noisy, and I had to get up and close the window. But in Dharma, I should have been able to control that. I noticed I felt like kind of annoyed about it. But Dharma means you could hear some classical music or a jackhammer and it wouldn't bother you. So it tells me I have a little bit more Dharma work to go. So Dharma might mean that we watch our words, we might stick to our principles even when it's easier to go with the crowd, or just checking in with our actions and our behaviours and how we might overreact or we might feel annoyed about something. Of course, the Noble Truths are the basis of the Buddhist teachings, and the prince is enlightened, but from then on, after he's had his experience under the Bodhi tree, he becomes the Buddha. So the Path 6 mystic, like the prince, often needs to have that period of darkness. A kind of crisis, we might think of it as a crisis in our humanness, and yet it's a dying to the previous life, of course, not physically, but awakening to a new reality. And so we still have to function as human beings in the human world, and the Buddha was not a god, he was a human being. And so when we speak of dying to the darkness, we're really talking about the death of the ego. And we know how much we love the ego in our humanness. It's very easy to become attached to it. So you might have heard some stories of people who've had serious illness, maybe AIDS or advanced cancer, and when they're asked, well, what was that experience like? They often say, well, I'm glad I had that experience. It's really changed me. It's made me put my priorities in the right order. And some of them even say, I would never go back to how it was before. So some are called to the contemplative life. If you're a religious person, you might become a nun or a monk. Or maybe you become a wise man or a wise woman that lives up on the mountaintop or in the cave. And some of us love the spiritual pilgrimage. So we go off somewhere for a while and then return back to our life. And that's really typical of the Path 6 mystic. In Unity, we practice centering prayer. This was a practice that the Trappist monks used. And we can trace it right back. The Trappists were very interested in how the mind works. And they used to say, well, the mind can't dissect itself. It can only transcend itself. So I find that very interesting, because if we're trying to figure out what's going on in the mind, don't do it, just transcend it. But they used to have they did their centering prayer, and they used to have an image in their mind, and the image was that they were running into the arms of the divine. What a beautiful image. So you might want to try that this week in your prayer time. In Matthew 6, Jesus says these words, "The light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, the whole body shall be full of light." And that comes from the King James Version. And a little bit later it was rewritten in the New Revised Standard Version. And listen to the words that they were replaced with. The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body shall be full of light. But if your eye is unhealthy, your whole body shall be full of darkness. So we get the idea, right? It's really about perception. Jesus speaks about, it's how you perceive things. If we look at those words in a metaphysical framework, it even goes deeper. And the eye symbolizes the power of perception we have that goes well beyond what we see with our physical eyes. The single eye is about being focused, having clarity. It suggests oneness. So we're not talking about separation or distraction or being scattered. It's being kind of in a place of oneness where we're firmly fixed on the truth. And being full of light refers to illumination. So that's not sensory illumination. It's not like when we turn the light switch on, but it's really the spiritual experience of illumination. And so wisdom is not intellectual, it's an experience. It's not what we see, it's how we see it. And our co-founder, Charles Fillmore, was talking about faith. He said, well, faith is the perceiving power of the mind linked with the power to shape substance. He says that whatever you hold in mind, infinite spiritual substance is gathering around that and creating that as your next greatest reality. And this all fits in perfectly with the words of Jesus in Matthew, the eye is the lamp of the body. And so I'm going to invite you in just for a few minutes as we experience these very powerful words together. So I ask you to gently close your physical eyes. Take a slow, deep breath in and fully release it. And hear these words of Jesus. The eye is the lamp of the body. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. And just open yourself to these words. And now bring your attention to the center of your forehead, the third eye. This is the spiritual eye, and imagine that eye opening up wide, knowing that that is the eye that sees the truth. And with every in-breath, see your inner light shining brighter. So breathing in light, releasing light into the room, breathing in light, releasing light outside of the building, breathing in light, releasing light out into the world. Return your awareness to the body and see a bright, radiant light just above the head. See it swirling above the head. And now let that flow down into the head and down into the heart area. Pausing at the heart for a moment. And then allow the light to pour into you, filling every corner of your body. And notice the sensations of that. Is it warm? Is it expansive? Does it bring peace to the mind? Is it calming to the heart? Does it give the sense of inner strength? And just see every cell of the body being illumined and feel the aliveness of that radiant energy. And in your own mind, or just in a quiet whisper, say these words. I see with the single eye of spirit. My whole being is filled with light. And taking in one more deep cleansing breath, release the breath. And then gently open your eyes. As you return to the room, see the light around you. see the light shining in one another. And so, God union happens at the soul level. It's almost beyond our perception. We don't even notice it when we meditate, but we see the results of it in the transformation in our own lives. And so today we've walked with the Path 6 mystic, the wise mystic. And I leave you with these words from Proverbs. Love wisdom and she'll make you great. Embrace her and she'll bring you honor. She will be your crowning glory. And so it is. Amen.